officer or employee, Director of Electric Utilities and General Counsel, and deliberate the appointment of a public officer or employee to the Electric Utility Board. We are in executive session. Okay, it's 12:45. We'll go ahead and call the meeting back to order. Open session, and is the city, they're not here in force, so, okay. So we'll go ahead with the first item, that is approve the minutes of the regular utility board meeting of June 21, 22. Anybody got any changes, thoughts, etc.? Hearing none, please signify your approval by saying aye and raising your hand. Aye, aye, aye. That passes. Next would be the presentation and discussion and update report from our Director of Utilities. Joel, you're on.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you.
Make sure everybody's awake after that good lunch. Huh? I think so. It's on the next one. What does the rookie need to do? The ON-OFF switch. Thank you, sir. That gets me every time. Just before I get started, I want to make a few comments leading in, but we did have a board member request to attend by Zoom today. In order to attend by Zoom, we need a little bit of notice. We've got to post it 72 hours in advance. So if something is not working out for you to be able to attend in person, let us know, and we can take care of the proper posting and make sure that can be done. In this case, we had not done that, and so we couldn't facilitate it. So just let us know. We do have to have a quorum here in order to host the meeting at all, but if one or two people need to attend by Zoom every now and then, we'll see what we can do to accommodate it. Just let us know that we need to make that posting, please. I wanted to talk a little bit about, last week with the two episodes we had with getting pretty tight on our energy reserves in the ERCOT system. And by the way, SPP was getting pretty tight also. They weren't quite where ERCOT was, but they were right on the cusp of it as well. This was a Midwest, more or less, issue that we were having in the United States. But I went back and did some quick math and spreadsheet work using the ERCOT 2022 seasonal assessment, and their net expected capacity availability was 90.9, so like 91 gigawatts is what they anticipated they would have available going through the summer season. I could pretty easily stress test that number and get it down to 82, 83 without really trying very hard. So you take a couple of generators offline, for whatever reason, generators will go offline whether you want them to or not. The issues that we have with the wind, we all saw that last week. The wind wasn't blowing when we really needed it to the most. So there's things like that you can do to put a stress on it. The criticality really showed that our thermal generators, our natural gas, coal, what have you, those thermal generators are absolutely critical to that capacity need. And then the wind, on top of that, how the wind performed just exacerbates the situation. So last Monday and last Wednesday, you could look. By the way, do you guys have the ERCOT app? You can go get the ERCOT app on the App Store if you're Apple. I'm not sure what it is on Android. But that gives you all this information in near real time. I think it updates on some frequency, hourly or whatnot. It's really a cool tool, and it gives you a good sense of how the system is performing. So kudos to ERCOT for even creating that. So what ERCOT does, if they know that they've got thermal generators that are going to be down, or if they know that their wind forecast, which they're getting pretty good with, by the way, if they know that forecast isn't going to show that they have that much wind availability, then they might go out and say, we need to call for conservation. And that's what we did last week, was just voluntary conservation. It wasn't really that big of a deal. I mean, it was. Everybody participated pretty well from near as we can tell. Thank you to Jared and the team with the city. They participated quite a bit, and we certainly appreciated that. If it looks like that reserve target becomes in jeopardy, they want to maintain a minimum of 2,300 megawatts in reserve at all times, minimum. If it looks like that target's going to start getting to be in jeopardy, or if you start getting issues with the frequency of the system, then all of a sudden we may need to take additional actions. And we were on alert last week that that could be a possibility. But ERCOT, I think, did a really good job of managing that. They've got things that they can do in their tool belt, their Batman tool belt. They can call on large load customers to come offline, and you could kind of follow the frequency dips in the system going up and down, and you could tell that they were making those moves at that point in time. So really, I think ERCOT did a pretty good job. If you look at today, we're projected to be like 108 degrees. The projected load on the ERCOT app is as much as it was last week at about 80 gigawatts, which is going to be an all-time record. But then you look at the capacity curve that they've got on that app as well, and they're in the upper 80s with what they're expecting to be having available. So we're not having any issues, even though the problem you would think would be worse than it was last week. So that means they have more generation available online. That means the wind is blowing like it's supposed to at the right times, and everything is working out. So it's really a neat tool. This is something that's going to be resident with us, I think, for some time. ERCOT is adding capacity into the system, but we're still going to have to be aware that there's going to be some, I want to say, individual and personal management if we want to go down the renewable energy path. We're just going to have to be ready to participate in this market a little bit more than we have in the past. Prior to wind and solar coming on board, we would have an overabundance of thermal generation, and we wouldn't have to really worry about this. Well, now we're trying to integrate more and more, drive the carbon emissions down and whatnot. And I agree with that. I think it's a good thing to do, but we've got to be a lot more vigilant individually and ready to participate when we can and should. If things ever go south within ERCOT, they can issue these energy alerts, emergency energy alerts, or energy emergency alerts as EEA. And so if the reserve margin gets below the 2,300 megawatt range, then they look at other paid interruptible loads that they can call the customers and say, you got to get off. And they've got something like 15 or 30 minutes to get offline, or sooner, hopefully. And that's about 2.5 gigawatts from what I got from the ERCOT side worth of support for the system that we can get out of that. If that doesn't solve the issue, and really what we're talking about is a frequency starting to collapse. So if your frequency nominally 60 hertz, it's going to have some variations as the generators are fighting against each other normally. It's what they do. That's why the zigzaggy line on that app shows the way that it does. These generators are really going to battle each other. If you get below 59.3, they're going to start coming offline right about that time, and the rest of the system's got to be ready to respond to that. And so if your frequency keeps going lower and lower, then you're really having to combat a really difficult situation. So they're going to start dropping more and more load as that goes. So they've got the interruptible customers that they can bring offline. The total is going to be, they got more that they can bring as well. The really, really large ones like probably the oil refineries, whatnot along the Gulf Coast. And then if it gets worse than that even, then we start implementing rolling blackouts. Now, I don't think we call that anymore. That's the harsh term for it. But a lot of people's lights go out all at the same time when that happens, and that's an automatic function of the system. So it's we weren't at that point. We bounced off of it once last week, I think, and then they corrected that and never got close again. So thankfully, they were able to call on the reserve backups that they needed to get that situation straightened out. And then I'm hopeful that we can get through the rest of the summer like we are today. Again, 108 degrees here, 108 probably in Dallas, and you start getting those big metroplex areas like Dallas and Houston heated up, and San Antonio, and that really drives the demand in this state. So it looks like we're in pretty good shape, certainly for today. So if you hear us reaching out to our customer base for a call for conservation, Matt would be the one that would be reaching out through the media outlets and whatnot. We try to do that in the morning. so that we can make sure people have the opportunity to participate. Because if you're already at work, you know, I may be the only person in Lubbock that has Wi-Fi thermostats. I have no idea. But if you don't, you know, it's hard to go back home and do your part. So we want to make sure that people get the message early enough so they can take action. It's not like there's anything imminent, but we want to make sure that we're doing whatever we can to keep it from becoming imminent at that point. Just wanted to do a commentary on that. If you all had any questions or concerns about that specifically, I'm happy to try to address any questions. We got a couple of experts out here that can help.
Joel, for maintenance of generation, just a rule of thumb, is that done annually? And do they have to schedule that with ERCOT before, let's say, a generation company says, you know, my guy's really tired, or do they have to schedule it? And then I guess there's someone that just goes and he quits. So could you kind of give us a little overview of that, please?
Yeah, normally, I would say typically it's an annual thing that you want to do. And you can imagine if you had your lawnmower just sitting on the yard running around the clock for 365 days, you're probably going to need to take it offline and do something, right? Think of a generator very much the same way. These things wear out. You get leaks in some pumps and seals and whatnot, and there's things that just have to be done and be taken care of. Typically, it's annually. It depends on maybe some warranty that you get from the manufacturer. We've been able to go 18 months where I came from every now and then, but still, the likelihood of something else happening that would bring that generator offline always exists. Something can happen, and it's always there, and you just got to be ready for that. So yeah, absolutely. It's usually on or about that annual basis. They will schedule this through ERCOT and make sure that there's not too many generators all down at the same time. Ideally, you do your maintenance periods in the fall and the spring when the loads are down, right? That's what everybody tries to do, and quite a bit too in the wintertime, because winter tends to be shortish in Texas. You have them, and it gets really cold, but it doesn't last very long. And so we try to get that done outside of the summer season as much as we possibly can. I think summer's getting to be longer and longer, so there's probably some pressure on a lot of the generators to actually have outages during the summertime. If they can do them quick, a couple of week turnaround, that's great. If it's going to be the normal couple of months, then that may be problematic, and you want to do that some other time. But it's a fairly concerted effort because what you really want is everything that can run to run during the summertime and be able to make it through the whole season. Okay. I don't really have any comments on the report itself. If you all want to have any questions of staff or anything, happy to entertain that.
Any questions on that?
Mr. Chairman, otherwise I'm going to turn the next part of this segment over to Matt. He's a much more eloquent speaker anyway.
Thank you, Joel.
I just want to very briefly update you on the fact that we had a technical review committee meeting just here recently, this past week, and just want to let you know that the committee got together and discussed mostly topics related to weatherization, solar panels. We talked a little bit about recent legislation that was passed that instructs utilities about what they can and can't do in terms of restricting customers' install of solar. And then we went into kind of our own net metering processes and the rate structure behind it, and how we've set that up over the years, how many customers participate in net metering, and what we're seeing in terms of trends over the past really kind of 18 to 24 months, with a lot more residential folks signing up for solar service and joining that net metering rate. And then from there, we kind of moved into some more of the kind of weatherization programs that are out there, what kind of can be done. There are a couple of agencies here locally that do that work, and then we've got the community development department of the city that works with these groups and has their own federal funds that they can assist with these programs. So I think it was a good conversation. I anticipate that we're probably going to be having more meetings and more conversations about this, but for those that were in attendance, thank you for coming and speaking and kind of giving us your thoughts. And I know Blair and myself took notes and are prepared for any kind of future technical review committee meetings related to this, expanding on specific topics. But I'll just kind of stop there. Just want to let you know that that took place. And if y'all have any questions or comments, anybody that's attendance, feel free to throw them out, and I'll try to answer them or add on to them.
Anybody have any questions? Yes, Jane?
Thank you. I just want to encourage you all to make this process of adding solar as simple and as quick as you can. I think that seems, last week, I think that the numbers were really high for the energy produced by solar, and we certainly have an abundance of it here. So I was real encouraged by the meeting that we're, making that available and not putting the brakes on it at all.
Absolutely, and there are benefits, not just in terms of offsetting the energy that you're using by putting solar panels on, but you do enjoy a lower base rate, and there are other things that are benefits of this. And again, we've seen over the last kind of 18 to 24 months, the number of residential customers double in terms of folks that have solar panels on their home. Still a smaller number compared to the 108,000 meters, but again, a doubling in that span of time means that customers at least have a growing interest in this, and so we'll continue to take a look at growing out those programs, and to your point, making it as easy as possible once somebody goes through that and working with the city in the permitting process, so it's as seamless as it can be once somebody makes that pretty major investment in their home.
Any other questions, comments? Thank you, Matt.
Awesome. Am I next? Okay. Okay. Had a request from a council member, but also thought it would be a good time to kind of just run over some kind of key facts and figures as it relates to our rates and what we're seeing with consumption thus far this summer. So going to start with the fact that our rate really is broken up into two pieces. You have your base rate that's listed as your energy charge. That typically comes out to about 30% of your total rate, as you'll see in that pie chart there. Your base rate or your energy charge is going to basically cover everything that we do in terms of operations, everything from operations and maintenance to salaries to long-term debt. It's all going to be really housed in that one portion of our rate. And then about 70% of your rate is going to be the purchase cost recovery factor, or as I like to call it, the pass-through, because it is what we pass through to our customers. That is what it costs us to make or buy power, and we pass that through with no markup. The other little part there is your service availability charge, your meter fee. That's a set $8.07 for your standard residential customer. The other two are actually rates. So looking at the base rate, I wanted to just kind of review that starting in 2014, we engaged in a 5-year program where we went out to the public and we said that every single year we're going to increase our base rates by 5.75% in order to pay for this large infrastructure project and to just get maintenance of our infrastructure caught up. We told our customers that we were spreading it over 5 years in equal amount. We told them that per 1,000 kilowatt hours, this equaled about $2 a month increase in your bill. And we explained each year what that was going to pay for so that they knew that it wasn't just kind of going into a black hole, but it was actually going to something that they would benefit from. After starting that program, we ended up ending it after 4 years. In that 4th year, we actually drew it down to 5% as opposed to 5.75, and then ended it early because we got to a point where we could move forward with these important projects with the rate structure where it was. So we were able to end that in 2017. And since 2017, that base rate has been frozen. And if you look at our budget, it's projected to stay that way, certainly through this fiscal year. The second part of your rate being that purchase cost recovery factor, a pass-through, as we've talked about a lot, natural gas is the main driver of that cost and that rate. And as you can see, starting in 2019 to this year, the price for natural gas has increased dramatically. You went from an average of 73 cents in the summer of 2019 to last summer that was $3.73 through the summer season. And then thus far this summer, we're looking at over $7 with, in any particular day, that number, cresting above $9 in terms of the price of natural gas. So we have seen that cost increase on us, but looking at this past winter moving into this summer, we were able to hold the entire rate the same, even that pass-through rate where the natural gas was higher. One of the things that we try to do with our purchase cost recovery rate is we try to stabilize that through the seasons. And the goal always is to get out of the winter season in a place where you can maybe subsidize summer rates if you've got some monies over collected from the winter season, or at the very least hold the line. This year, given the pressures of natural gas, holding the line was a pretty big victory. When you look across the state right now, you see stories of some utility rates going up 70% because of the cost of natural gas. We were able to hold the line through the summer, which is good because it's been an extremely hot summer. And so that has helped our customers that the rate didn't go up at the same time their consumption was. But looking forward, that pass-through rate is going to be impacted by natural gas. So if it stays on that elevated level, we're going to have to look at that closely. But if you look at 2019, when gas was lower, we were able to use that model of the wintertime rates subsidizing summertime. So we were able to draw that down in 2020. I think it was in 2019 that we gave back about $12 million because, basically we were at a spot where coming into summer and forecasting natural gas prices, we were able to give that money back to our customers. In 2021, we were in a position where we could have subsidized a little bit, but Winter Storm Uri and the impacts of that, we were able to pay everything that we needed to pay after that February month, but it meant that we didn't have that cushion going into summer. So we couldn't subsidize those rates. But for the last 2 summers, we've held them the same. But summer over summer, you can see that the cost has increased from 21 to 22, even though we held the line going from winter to summer. And then I'll just show you real quickly that, kind of how that calculates out on your bill. You can see that, the service availability has stayed the same. The base charge has stayed the same. The PCRF has increased slightly, but again, going from winter 21-22 to summer, we've held that the same. The difference being that our average customer in the wintertime uses 726 kilowatt hours versus 1,363 kilowatt hours in the summer months. So a lot of what we've been doing is going out to the public and telling them that they need to look at their consumption. The rate has stayed the same, but as you'll hear me say a lot, every single year from May to June to July, customers are going to use 2 to 3 times more electricity just simply because it's 100 degrees outside versus 75. So we've really been trying to drive that home. The media has been doing a good job of putting this type of information out there. You'll notice here on this screenshot that I took that we're also using paid media to push our messages in terms of adjusting your thermostat, changing your air filters, and things that you can do. And all of those lead you back to our Powerful Pointers program on our website. Again, here's another screenshot that I took, and just to show you that where we average about 10 days, we average 10 days a summer that are over 100 degrees, already this summer we've hit 22 days over 100 degrees. And this snapshot was taken from last week, so add several more days on top of that. I don't know if we'll reach 2011, which was the high water mark, but we're certainly going to be well ahead of these previous summer months. I want to see if this works. This is a graphic that we're going to start putting out, but this shows over the last 3 years. You see where the temperatures go up, and you can see where our customers' usage follows suit. So that's 2019, that's 2020, and 2021, it was a little bit cooler, and you'll see that consumption drops down. But we're going to continue to push these types of graphics out to our customers just to illustrate that it really does, when the temperature goes up, we see our energy use amongst our customers really follow in line with that, and then track back down in the shoulder down months of September, October, and November. But again, just trying to drive home that this is a natural curve that happens, and that's why we always try to do whatever we can to hold rates the same or subsidize in the summer. It's not that easy to do these days with natural gas price being where it is. And then the last thing I'll just show you is just that, I'm sorry, Senator. Yeah.
Is there any chance that the green line is also thanks to the fact that customers have gotten smarter and used more of the LED bulbs and changed out their thermostats? And
We do see a
can we
little bit of,
credit them a little bit?
we do see a little bit of that, but I think that primarily was just that dip in temperature that we got a little bit of relief. But we are seeing more, and for example, Steve Moon, who works with me, he's constantly working with our larger commercial customers, getting them to change out light bulbs. We did a story not too long ago about Sutherland's switching out their entire fleet to new LED bulbs, and they saved 30% off of their bill just switching out that entire fleet. So we're continuing to work, especially with the larger commercial customers, because on a residential level, it makes an impact if everybody does it, and individually, it certainly helps them. But if you can get these larger big box stores and these types of folks to do these energy efficiency measures, it helps the entire system in terms of energy use.
I think those
sure.
would be good stories to put out.
Yes, ma'am. And then this is just a sampling of some of the stuff that we put out on a regular basis. Joel was talking about the fact that we really try to push it when ERCOT says it's going to be tight or SPP puts out a resource advisory. But really what I'm telling the public is that these messages that ERCOT's putting out in these voluntary conservation calls, they're the same exact things that we're passing to customers every day, every week during the summer so that they can save money on their own bill. And again, it's changing out your air filters, adjusting your thermostats, but also doing stuff like on June 21st, pointing out that this is going to be the longest day of the year. So make sure today in particular that you keep your blinds closed into the evening hours and doing things like that. And then, like I say, if you go to our website, right under savings and efficiency, powerful pointers is right there. It takes you to that page that gives you a bunch of things that you can do. It also links to Energy Star, where there are just a million different things that you can do to be energy efficient, from appliances to activities. But all the social media that we're running and all the paid media, if you click through to that, it takes them right to this website. And that's why we've seen a large increase this month and hopefully continue to see an increase, because we're going to continue pushing this messaging out until we get to the fall months. So that was a quick run through, but any questions that you have, I'd be happy to answer.
Any questions? Okay, thank you, Matt. Appreciate it.
Thank y'all.
Next up, is that Joe? No. Yeah. Glad you're here, Chris.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me. Strategic planning. Some people really love it. Some people, there's some reasons why people really like strategic planning and some people don't. My name is Chris Sims, and I serve as the Director of Grid Control and Regulatory Compliance for LP&L. And about a month ago, Joel approached me about strategic planning. And I jumped at the opportunity to be involved with it because over these 27 years, I can only remember one other time that we've done it, and that was in 1999, I believe, either 98 or 99. And Joel was like us to transition to start strategic planning maybe on an annual basis. And some of the ways in the framework that we hope to accomplish, I think it'll be meaningful because we're going to use a traditional strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats model, a SWOT model, but we're going to follow it up with what's called a TOES model. And a TOES model with your threat, opportunities, and weaknesses and strengths will help you implement what you found out from your SWOT analysis. And so about a month ago, Joel and I started working on a framework. What might like this? What would it look like? Who would be involved? Kind of the timing of the process, and what, with the goal of being annually, we want to get to the point of what's our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats post-retail competition, 2024. But in order to do that, we really need to see where we're at now, because LP&L has been around for over 100 years. We do some things very well. Some things we can improve on, and we don't want to lose sight of those things that we do well. That kind of defines what we are and how we've been operating over 100 years. In the electric industry, if you're on the outside in looking at Lubbock Power and Light from 1916 to 2024, you'll see these 4 legs of the organization. You'll see a wires component or a function, a business office function, a generation, that's the power plant's function. You'll see administration. And then we put in here a City of Lubbock function because there's some functions there on shared services that are very important to us operating the utility. And you'll see some of those are highlighted there. And that's how we are now. And next, how we believe we will look like, or what we will look like, post-retail competition. With the major change there being our electric retail function in the business office. It's more of a hybrid. It will operate still as part of the business office, but it will be viewed as part of the wires business. And we're still working through how all that will come to fruition, but this is one idea of how we anticipate that might look after retail competition. A lot of what you see here on some of these functions that are currently being performed in the business office or City Lubbock Utilities with the electric retail side will be accomplished with a lot of new technology and a lot of automations that we're working through right now on how and what that will look like. So as we look at a kind of a focus to the first SWOT analysis we've done in quite a while, we identified a kind of 3 pillars that we want to, when we look at our strengths, we looked at our weaknesses, we look at our opportunities and threats, we want to categorize them into these 3 pillars: affordability, dependability, and sustainability. With affordability, we have some definitions here for it. We have a definition for dependability and a definition for sustainability. Knowing that these definitions, everyone can come up with something a little different. What's affordable to you might not be affordable to me. What's affordable to LP&L might not be affordable to a co-op. So Joel and I, we worked and to come up with these definitions on just set some rails on kind of how we believe that affordability, dependability, and sustainability will look like now and as we move on, since Joel's been here and kind of where he would like to take us. So I'm looking at a process, at a framework. We're going to go just the simplest way we can to get the most input that we can from the stakeholders, and that's with a survey. And so we have a survey that will be ready this afternoon. And what it does is it breaks up our strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats into these 5 categories. And you'll notice these categories are very similar. Actually, they're identical to how Jenny titled the agenda for you today. Looking at our organizational resource needs, rate structures, strategic goals for transmission distribution, occupational performance and safety metrics, and then other changes we need to consider. So the survey, the initial survey that'll be ready this afternoon, allows you to enter up to 5 strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats for each one of these categories. You don't have to list 5. You can list 1 or you can skip it. The only question I've made mandatory on the survey is, what type of stakeholder are you? And you can choose other. It's anonymous. We're not looking for names or anything that would identify you. Just kind of what type of a stakeholder are you? And that'll help us kind of internally to see where we can work with the toes on maybe getting some more information. How are we actually going to implement this? So another thing with SWOT analysis is a lot of people frown on them because nothing ever gets done. And that's why we're going to implement a toes analysis right after it to come up with a method to accomplish what we'd want to do. And the other thing is they can be long. So I really had a goal of making this survey. If you complete every box, the vendor's tool that we're using right now tells me that it should take at most 30 minutes. So if you don't have 30 minutes to spare, you might want to go in and do one and then come back later and finish it, or close it out and come back and do another one. We just want as much feedback as we can, and I tried to make it as least restrictive as we can on the survey. So there's around 100 possible inputs that you could put if you're really, really, gung-ho and I've got great ideas, then there's a lot of opportunities for you to express those ideas. And there's 20 per category on each one of these categories here. As far as a timeline for completing this SWOT and TOES analysis, Today, of course, we would like to roll out the survey and give about a month for people to take a look at it, complete it, partially complete it, whatever your pleasure. And then about a week following that to review the top 5 results. And we may narrow that down to 3, but we're going to try to identify the top 5 and have representation from the stakeholders in this review to help us see what are the top 5 that really stood out. Everyone's talking about this. We need to identify this. The next week, begin a tolls analysis back to the stakeholders based upon what we found from the SWOT analysis. And that will run for about a month, and then giving us 1 more week to review the tolls analysis. And then on October the 4th, I believe it's been scheduled, there's a scheduled strategic planning meeting. So this will allow us to do a lot of homework ahead of time, kind of identify and focus in on what we think is going to provide us with some great opportunities. And then for the October 4th meeting, so that can be really impactful. It's not just, oh, we did one, let's put it on the shelf. I think we'll have some good feedback and good dialogue with all these stakeholders. Now, if you're new to SWOT analysis, there's 2 components of it, your strengths and your weaknesses, that are internal. So there you look for affordability, dependability, and sustainability, those 3 pillars that Joel has set for us. And you look for the positives to be exploited in your strengths and also external opportunities. On your weaknesses, that's internal weaknesses, affordability, dependability, sustainability, and the negatives to be minimized. And then on the external, your threats. And then if you're new to tolls analysis, there's a few bullet points in there that kind of tell you what the goals are. Primarily, for external opportunities, it's use your strengths to take advantage of your opportunities. And on external threats, it's use your strengths to remove the threat or minimize it as much as you can. And I believe this will be a good path to go forward. It'll get better year after year, but I believe this will be a successful framework to start with. This you'll see on the survey. So a lot of folks, when they get started on a survey like this, especially for SWOT, you kind of get lost. Okay, what is a strength? What is this? I know it's kind of hard to see. I did place it on the survey, and it's just kind of some examples to get you thinking. Maybe these are some considerations. Is our staffing, is that a strength? And would staffing fall under dependability, affordability, or sustainability? We have a funded budget that we're operating under right now under this fiscal year. But there's many others, and you'll probably come up with some great ideas. These are just kind of some prompters to get you thinking about some possible strengths, some possible weaknesses, some possible opportunities and threats. Opportunities and threats are always the hardest because in any organization, you kind of get focused on internal and you forget to look external. And opportunities and threats are external with a SWOT analysis. By the way, in the survey, it's 6 pages long, and the first page is basically this, just so you can go back to the first page to go, I really want to contribute, but I can't think of a weakness. We'll read through there, and maybe that'll jog something that you can identify for us. So here is one example, and I just picked one, and it's an internal strength, and I identified it under dependability. LP&L as an organization has been operating over 100 years. We've been operating wires, business office, generation, administration for 100 years. We've done some things right, and this is just an example. And so I would identify on the survey as organization has over 100 years experience, electric wires and business office, generation, and administration functions, and I'd list it under the dependability dropdown. We'll look more at the tolls analysis later as we go on, especially if you'd like to be involved in the review process, because there's a lot of different ways to do strategic planning. Probably 6 to 12 I can think of off the top of my head. One of the popular ones a lot of folks use is a McKinsey model, McKinsey 7. But this is pretty simple. If you ever had any business classes in high school, or if you went to college or junior college, you probably learned a little bit about a SWOT analysis. So I tried to find something that everybody would be somewhat familiar with, and then add on toes that you may not be, but I think once we get through it and you kind of understand it, you'll see why toes analysis is important. There is a reminder at the beginning of each page, that we're looking at strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, how we exist right now. Next year, we're going to look at strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats moving forward. So it's kind of a hybrid, but that question at the top, there will be a reminder to remind you, what are we doing right now for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats? That's all I have. Do you have any questions? The email likely would come from Matt and or Jenny to our stakeholders, likely this afternoon, maybe tomorrow. And like I said, it's just click on the link, take the survey. I will tell you that I did several test runs, and if you want to start the survey and maybe come back to it later, don't clean your browser cache because it stores it there, and it'll take you back and want you to restart the whole survey, which is no problem. If you just want to skip what you already did and start a new one, there's no problems there.
Any questions, anybody? Chris, thanks. Appreciate it. All right, next. We're good. You?
Okay. We're going to go through our May financials, and we'll get started with the balance sheet. So we're going to see an increase in our cash and our cash equivalent, so about $10 million. So this is an increase of about $5.7 million from last month, and that's mostly going to be attributed to a drawdown we did on bonds, so that'll also be reflected in our restricted investments as a decrease. In our construction in progress, we see an increase of about $21 million. This is around $500,000 from last month. That's going to be attributed to $3.4 million in spending and maintenance and upgrades to distribution, as well as the market transaction management project. And that's going to be offset by $2.9 million being capitalized in assets. We do see an overall decrease in our total assets. As we discussed last month, this is mainly due to bond and interest payments that we made. But we do see a $5 million increase from last month. In our accounts payable, we do see a decrease from year end. This is mainly due to timing. However, there is an increase of about $7 million from last month, and that's going to be to higher purchase power costs that we had. In our deferred revenues, we see that we're in a negative position now of almost $1 million. Last month, we discussed that this would be coming due to our rising fuel costs that we have, and we will likely see this number continue to decrease over the next couple months. There's been no change to our current liabilities, and our total liabilities are showing a decrease of $31 million since year end. In our charges for services, we're going to see an increase of a little less than $6 million. This is going to be due to our higher PCRF rates. In our T-cost revenues, you'll notice there's quite a big difference between this year and last year, and that's because we entered ERCOT at the end of May, so May 21 totals are just reflecting the last couple of days of May when we were actually in ERCOT. In June, we'll start to be able to see an actual year-to-year comparison. In our hold harmless payment, I did discuss last month that we won't start to see that until a comparison year-to-year until February. In our operating expenses, we see an $11 million increase, and this is going to be mainly due to our higher purchase power costs, as well as slight increases in personal services and our depreciation expenses. The increase in our operating income is mainly going to be due to our under-collected position that we're in. In our non-operating revenues, we see an increase of about $1 million. $500,000 of this is due to our FFEM pilot expenses, as you know, we have higher revenues. And then the other $500,000 is going to be to our higher interest expense on bonds that we have. Okay, we're doing a little something different this month. You are going to see a little different stuff. If you want to follow along numbers-wise, this will be on page 39 of your book and our actuals to budget. So what we're going to do is just take you through where we're at in just the main categories compared to where we thought we would be at this time. So at this point, we should be at about 67% of our budget. We can see in our departmental expenses and our purchase power expenses, we're about 57%. And then in our charges for services, we're at 61%. However, with the summer months upon us, we're gonna see those numbers start to meet expectations over the next few months. In our T-cost revenue, we're at 58%. I did some forecasting on these numbers, and we're gonna meet about 90% of what we budgeted. And the reason for this is we budget based on the 2024 CP, but our 2021 4CP, that's what we charge off of, was lower than our 2024 CP. The 4CP, Joe can explain that.
Yes.
You're good.
Yes,
I think it was Joel that asked the question, but go ahead.
yes, so our 4CP is the four coincident peaks. So what that is, it's the summer months when ERCOT has the highest peak load. The total system of the ERCOT load is the 4CP amount. So when that ERCOT load is at the highest point, that's what everybody's 4CP is at that given time. So it's the exact interval of the exact minute of the highest load of ERCOT. So for example, our 4CP was really low this month because when ERCOT hit their 4CP, it was a cloudy day here in Lubbock on that day. So our 4CP was lower that month for LPNL. So everybody has our individual 4 coincidence peak, but it's based on ERCOT's highest load, and that's in the summer months. June, July, August, and September. So like I said, so it's the system as a whole for ERCOT. So when ERCOT's 4CP, the total load, the highest, that's when they give everybody else their 4CP at that exact interval at that time.
And they're given to us in January, and they're not approved until about April. So we'll get that number in January and have an idea, and then be able to start running with it in April of every year.
Yeah.
So there's an overall, and then there's a specific for Lubbock, is that what you're saying?
Yes, that's correct. So there's the overall ERCOT total 4CP, and then everybody's transmission costs for that year are based on LPNL's load at that given time at ERCOT's highest 4CP. Does that make sense?
So you've got ERCOT's total big load, and then each, like Lubbock has something and maybe Houston has something, and
Yeah, so it's all based on ERCOT's 4CP. So whenever ERCOT hits that highest point of the load, whatever interval, whatever load LPNL was at that time, that's what your 4CP is going to be.
okay, so
Yes.
you're mirrored images of each other on a
Ye-
certain date and time.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Joe.
Yep.
Okay. And our hold harmless payment is coming in at 51%. I forecasted this as well, and we'll meet 99% of what we budgeted for that. Okay, now we'll look at our cash flows. We see a positive cash flow in our operating activities. This is going to be due to our increased revenues. In our financing activities, we're going to see a negative cash flow, and that's going to be due to construction project spending. And then in our investing activities, we see a positive cash flow, and that's going to be due to interest earnings as well as a movement of funds from restricted to unrestricted. Do y'all have any questions for me?
Any questions? Hearing none, thank you
Thank
so
y'all.
much. Thanks, Harvey.
Now you're into the fun stuff now. Talk budget. So the fun thing about talking about budget is the budget, I always like to start off with this 2-second headline when you talk about budget, because it's easy to just dive into it and dive into the eye charts and get into it because there's a lot of detail behind it. But really, the budget is going to be reflecting how you're going to fund, and it's going to be a reflection of your strategic and your operational objectives for the year. And it tells a story. So it's not just the numbers and the crunching, which is important, but it's going to tell a story. It's going to say, it's going to reveal what's driving our activity. It's going to reflect activity so that as Joe walks through it, he'll get into the descriptions of all those activities that are driving that budget. And that's a reflection of what we're trying to do and achieve for LP&L for our citizens. And the fun thing about it then is, then Casey will come up as she walks through the actuals. She's basically telling you, how's that playing out during the course of the year? How's that looking? So as you see the activity happening and you see that construction happening and you see changes happening and you see projects moving forward, it's all being reflected in what she's talking about. So we're just trying to pull together that narrative for you. And as we go through this budget, there's going to be an overriding narrative, and that's going to be our transition to best position LP&L in a post-competitive world. How do we best position it for our ratepayers? And the two major drivers here are going to be our move to ERCOT, which will be sometime on or around June 1st, and then eventually our transition to retail competition. Those two activities are going to be driving, you'll hear that theme throughout the budget, how it's being played out in our capital, in our debt, and what we're trying to achieve. So just know that that's going to be a fundamental driver. And as we walk through this, is going to be reflection. The financial model covers about a 6-year period and what our estimated revenues and expenses are going to be for those 5 years, and tells you our plan. What are we trying to achieve? Just as Matt covered, there's no anticipated rate changes built into this, into the out years. We will have, and that's for our tariff changes, we will have a delivery charge that will start to come on when we make that transition into a retail market. That's going to be established. I think the AUB got a chance to hear quite a bit of detail on that back in January, what we thought that estimate was going to be, and our goal is to try to become about average to the market when we get to that point. And then we come to probably a bigger highlight, and you'll see it because it's a red number at the bottom. And nobody, as a financial person, no, I don't like to see red on a chart because that's never good news for me. But here it's not necessarily bad news. It's merely a reflection of a transition that we're trying to achieve. So if you'll notice, our actual, our reserve from last year was right about $70 million. And if you look at it, what it's anticipated to be for this budget year, it's just about $1 million less than that. So it's relatively flat. The big change for us is going to be that two things, actually three things. One is we're going to stay in the market for a full 12 months when we really only anticipated we would stay there for 8. This is kind of going back because we're going to need some more time to get into that market, and that's just per a plan. And the other part is, as Matt kind of walked through his graph, so I'm going to kind of leverage off of his rather than go off of mine. And that is because purchase power costs are going up, and that's a reflection of gas. So purchase power costs are going to go up, so you'll see that change. And you're going to be going through basically the critical points of the most expensive period for us, and that's going to be through the summer period. That's going to be included in this. And then also you're going to start to see the beginning reflection of additional debt that we're proposing to take on. And what you'll see in next year, you'll see the first payment towards the $70 million for the capital work for final integration into ERCOT market. You'll see the first payment of that come through in April of next year. And because of that, we set our reserves. The city ordinance sets that reserve at 90 days of operating revenue, retail sales revenue. That retail sales revenue is going to be a reflection of those costs, and so consequently, that goes up. So that goes up almost $11 million from the prior year for reserve, reflecting that increase. But we're holding our reserve flat. So now we've got this $9.1 million difference between where we should be per policy for our reserve and then looking at where we actually are. The recommendation is that we don't chase that number, because if you look at subsequent years, you'll notice that we're quite flush, and we're well deep into that money. We're well past our reserve requirement for all the following 5 years. So there's no sense in trying to increase or get to that point where you're going to increase that amount of money. So that puts us at, really, instead of 90 days, it puts it at 79 days. And so I think we're still very adequate where we should be for reserve. The next part of this is going to be looking at this includes the principal and interest in our debt service. Also includes the increase in our transmission cost of service revenues, because now we're looking at a full year of revenue. And not only that, but the basis of it will be looking at it at a rate of return of over $40 million a year. So that also increased. And then we also have the drop-off of our capacity costs due to early termination, the partial requirements contract with SPS. That is you'll hear about more. That's pending regulatory approval on that, but that'll be coming up, and that's an assumption that we have in the model. Also assumes a complete shift to 100% of our customers to ERCOT by late in 2023. Incorporates significant capital investment, and then this is part of our final integration, and then the market transaction management system. That's all part of our reporting and our integration with ERCOT and having that information available. That's a massive project. Reduces our exposure to volatile purchase power costs. So as Matt demonstrated in his graph, you could just see how power costs continue to flash with gas. After we go into a post-retail environment, our revenues aren't going to be as flashy with that. It does change with our delivery costs, which is going to be based off of kilowatt hours as opposed to purchase power costs. So we'll have a little more stability there. And then we also have a 5.5% cost of living adjustment increase. And we do not have any new net positions. We're trying to hold it flat, not continuing to increase staffing levels. We're just holding it flat. We do have open, budgeted, and vacant positions, so if there's a new position required, we're trying to stay within that. So you eliminate one, and you keep another. So we're trying to stay flat on our labor. One thing I wanted to point out, too, is when we make that termination payment for our purchase power, our partial requirements agreement with SPS, we're going to fund that through debt. This was a graph that Andy presented last year and showed that, obviously our annual contract payment would be $17 million and increasing to almost $400 million over that 22-year period. We're going to finance that with debt. When Andy presented it before, he was looking at a 30-year plan to pay that off. We found that we can do that more effectively just using 20 years of debt. So it would allow us to pay that debt off 10 years sooner. And there may be opportunities with the hold harmless payment dropping off in about 4 years to use some of that TCOS revenue to put ourselves in a position where we could pay that off even sooner. And as Matt presented, that we don't have any new rate change for our tariff rates assumed in our budget for next year. And with the $60 million in par revenue that we're going to use for our CIP for final load integration, the first payment on that will reflect a $4.9 million increase in our debt service, and our net TCOS revenue will continue to grow slightly. It'll continue to grow in the years in the future. And then this presents our capital program over this year, current year, and next year. And the $60 million that we're anticipating for final integration, if you look at that, if you look at what we've got here for this 103.18, that makes up just about 63.1%. That $60 million makes up about 63% of that $103 million. So that shows you what we're going to be spending on for our distribution upgrades and our MTM project, plus other annual projects, because we do have, in addition to the move, we do have other projects we're doing to continue to keep upgrades on our substations and our poles and wires. And the power cost, purchase power cost pass-through here shows a $32 million increase, again, reflecting increased purchase power costs. And then also, we're going to continue in the market for about another 4 months. Operations, we'll see a slight increase in our operation costs. Capital costs will decrease slightly because we're finishing up a lot of work from this year going into next year. And then we'll have transfers really moving money into our capital projects. So we'll see a transfer there increase in about 13%. Any questions? It's a lot.
There's a lot to-
Joel will go into the detail on this, so just know that underneath of this, Joel will cover the detail on that.
Any questions? Thank you, Hardy.
All right, thank you.
Good afternoon again, everyone. Yes, and so like Harvey mentioned, what I'm going to do, my part of the presentation will go into the details of the fiscal year 2023 or 22-23 proposed operating budget. And what I'll do is I'll highlight the major changes from from this fiscal year to next fiscal year. Again, this presentation was presented to the Finance Committee on July 13th in depth. So for the purpose of this presentation, I'm going to keep it at a higher level overview. But again, if you have any questions along the way, please feel free to stop me and I can address them. I also wanted to point out before, I really wanted to give a shout out to my staff, Daniel Garcia and Tanika Williams. You know, that they're a really big help, you know, with budget process, as well as to our director and our CFO and our legal team as well. And all the department heads that are here, it's really a team effort. You know, it's a process that we started in March and we finish up in July. So you can see the time it takes. You know, I know it's that financial model is just one page, but there's a lot of things that go behind that to get that model up to date. So with that being said, I'm going to start off with our funding sources. On this chart, you can see that the majority of our funding sources come from general consumed meter base rates. Matt and Harvey touched on this. This, again, is our base rates and service availability charge that on the customer's bill. And this is, these rates are the revenues generated from this rate paid for our O&M and the cost it takes to provide energy to our customers. Next is our net T-cost revenues, which come in about $20 million or 17.4%. These are a rate of return on our transmission assets in ERCOT. Our total T-cost revenues really come in about $42 million, but as you all know, we have a $22 million annual whole harmless payment due to ERCOT, which offsets the T-cost revenues, and we get about a $20 million annually right now. The total T-cost revenue or the total ERCOT whole harmless payment was about $110 million, but was budgeted to be paid over 5 years. So by fiscal year 26-27, we anticipate to pay that ERCOT whole harmless payment off. So in fiscal year 27-28, we'll see those T-cost revenues north of $40 million coming directly back to the utility without a whole harmless payment due with that. Our franchise fee equivalent totals about $14 million or 12% of our budget, and these are just strictly 5% of our PCRF revenues. Our miscellaneous account totals about $5.7 million or 4.9%. And what's budgeted in this account this year is the insurance proceeds we expect to get back from the Massengill turbine repairs. You know, we've spent about $7.75 million on the repairs to the Massengill turbine to date. And we use a very conservative number here of $5.7 million to get reimbursed from the insurance proceeds, and this also includes our business interruption claims. So the reason I wanted to budget it for next year is, you know, we spent that $7.75 million cash out the door this fiscal year, which is, you know, affects your O&M. So we wanted to budget it for next year so we can see, we know we're going to get a return on our investment or a return from the insurance on that. We don't know exactly how much we're going to get. We hope it's north of $5.7 million, but to be conservative, that's what we've budgeted for next fiscal year. The remaining categories are other funding sources, which come in about $7 million or 6.1%, and those are broken down a little bit further on the next slide. Of those funding sources, about $3 million or 42.4% is related to fees and charges. These are the revenues generated from late fees, reconnect, and disconnect fees. Our transfers in total about $1.6 million or 22.7%, and these are the city's utility department's reimbursement to us for their portion of the AMI and CCS debt. Our outside work orders total about $1.1 million or 15.9%. Our interest earnings come in at about $1 million or 14.2%, and these are the yields we receive from our investment portfolio. Sale of equipment comes in about $200,000, and these are just the auction proceeds from the sale of older vehicles and equipment. Rentals and recoveries come in about $100,000, and these are the revenues generated from our pole attachment fees, which total about $100,000 annually. And lastly is our tampering fees, which come in at about $50,000 or 0.8%. So this kind of wraps up the total, our major funding sources for next fiscal year. Unless there's any other questions, we'll move on to the operating expenses. Good. As I mentioned, next category is operating expenses. This chart provides you a breakdown of all our expenses for fiscal year 22-23. I'll go into a little bit more detail on most of these, but as you can see on here, the majority of our expenses are capital-related costs and transfers out. Our capital-related costs total about $56.7 million, or 48.6% of the total budget. And these are related to the cash transfer to capital for our annual projects, as well as the debt service interest and principal payments. So that's a big chunk of our expenses. Our transfers out total about $20.4 million, or 17.3%, and these are directly related to transfers to the city, which include our indirect cost allocation, our franchise fee, and pilot. Sorry about that. Offsetting our cost slightly is a reimbursement of $6 million, again, from the City of Lubbock Utilities. This is to pay for their portion of the customer service function. Of course, as you know, we budget all the customer service costs in our O&M, which total about $15 million. So the city reimburses us about $6 million of that, which leaves us about a $9 million cost to run our customer service departments. Compensation did go up from $19.7 million to $20.9 million for next fiscal year. $212,000 of that is related to increase in full-time staff in this fiscal year, as long as the addition of 2 transmission system operator positions added to the distribution load dispatching department for next year. And you know, we've added these 2 new positions, but actually it's a net savings to us. We have a contract for these current positions right now, and we pay about $270,000 for that contracted labor, and this actual position will cost us about $130,000 with benefits and compensation. So we're really net saving about $140,000, and adding these 2 positions allows the transmission control room to be fully staffed 24 hours a day per NERC standard. So those are some guidelines that we have to abide by now. Our overtime and part-time pay has increased about $120,000, and that's just strictly based on average costs in the prior year. So we've increased that as well. Our terminal pay has decreased $32,000 due to fewer anticipated retirements for next year as compared to this year. We lost some big key positions this year that we had to pay out on terminal pay for this fiscal year. And the biggest driver of the increase in pay is the 5.5% cost of living adjustment, which totals about $880,000. This cost of living adjustment is what the city has plugged in currently in their budget, you know, and as a functioning city department, we have followed suit in the 5.5%. So if the city does move from that number, we will adjust accordingly on that. So that could come down based on the city's final number, but for right now, to be conservative, we have budgeted at the full 5.5%, which they are projecting to do. As you can see, benefits have increased from $8.2 million to $8.7 million, and this is just a direct result of increase in compensations. Your compensation goes up, so do your benefits follow. Our maintenance has increased about from $2.6 million to $3.0 million. Our customer service department has increased $11,000, and that's just due to an increase in motor vehicle maintenance. You know, as we try to keep our vehicles for longer life, it's expected that the maintenance on these vehicles increases as well. Our production maintenance has decreased $23,000 due to our lower anticipated spending for structure and plant maintenance. As we mentioned, you know, we just repaired Massengale turbine, and we repaired GT2 3 years ago. So you would expect that the cost of maintaining these units does go down. So that's the reason you see the decrease in maintenance. Our transmission maintenance and distribution maintenance have increased $71,000 and $306,000 respectively. And this is solely based on inflationary costs. You know, the cost of supplies and equipment have gone up. So we have budgeted accordingly for next year, you know, and gave the budgets extra funding for next year to accommodate those increased prices that they're seeing out there. Our professional service and training budget increased from $9.1 million to $9.5 million. Our regulatory compliance department did decrease due to a reduction in the annual NERC MRO assessment fee. And our billing system did increase $299,000 due to inflationary costs and the extra cost for Oracle for extra software needed for the CCS system. Our contract services have increased $42,000, and the majority of these contracts have just increased from inflationary prices. You know, it takes our contractors a little bit more to serve our contracts, so they have increased prices, so we have budgeted accordingly for that as well. Advertising and promotion has increased $15,000 due to anticipated higher ad buys. As Matt mentioned, as we transition our customers to the retail market, we do expect to buy more ads and give more educational information out there. That's the reason for the increased budget on the advertisement. Training and travel has increased $80,000 in order to maintain NERC, ERCOT, and SCADA credentials as required. And lastly, our miscellaneous has increased about $13,000, and this is mostly due to cost for oral sampling. Again, it's just gone up like everything else has on those budgets. Rounding out our expenses are our scheduled charges. This is probably one of the biggest increases that we have seen in our O&M this fiscal year, for next fiscal year. So our budget last year was about $6.9 million. That has increased to about $10.3 million. The main driver of this, again, is property and liability insurance. Our premiums have increased due to the claims we've made on our units recently over the past couple of years, so that has increased costs. Loss history and just the volatility of the insurance market. There's less and less providers out there in the insurance market that want to take on generation. So that has really increased, that gives you less options to choose from, and so that has increased prices on that as well. Another thing to note is that for fiscal year 22-23, the city negotiated an 18-month insurance contract. So we budgeted for the 18 months in fiscal year 21-22. So that's the reason that you see the increase for that. So next year, it'll go back to the normalized cost for insurance. So you'll see scheduled charges decrease in fiscal year 23-24. Our IT services have increased $170,000, and this is just due to the city's increase in their IT budget currently. Utilities have decreased $81,000 based on lower anticipated water charges. And lastly, our miscellaneous has decreased about $16,000, mainly due to a decrease in the communication services, which is a City of Lubbock department. That kind of rounds out our expenses for fiscal year 22-23, and unless there's any questions, we'll go on to our PCRF. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Joe, what is our total cost for property and liability insurance in the budget? You said it's gone up $3 million, so what was it before? So what's the total amount we're
Yes,
paying,
I
do you
believe
know?
it was. Yes, I think I don't have the exact number, but it is over $6 million. So this cost of the 3.3, I believe it was 3.2 million last year.
Okay, so it's about a double.
Yes, it's about a double.
Okay, thank you.
Yes,
And would that be true just of us, or is that going to be true
No,
of the
that
city
is the
too?
insurance cost across the whole city.
Across the board,
Yes, it
okay.
is. So again, this is a scheduled charge of the city budgets for us, and they transfer that cost to us, but we get the backup for it, so you can see the insurance costs have increased across the board, all the city departments as well.
So just for perspective, I think Joe's gonna, for the insurance, 2.2 million of that has to do with our generation assets.
Yeah.
So a big chunk of that has to do with our generation assets.
Okay.
So the other thing too, I'm talking from the bench over here. Of that 3.3, if you were to just normalize that to 12 months, because you're cramming 18 months into that, if you were to look at that on an apples to apples 12 months basis, that 3.3 is really 2.2 over a 12-month period, but we budget on a cash basis. But of that increase, 2.2 million of that has to do with the generation assets, and that's just, part of that is our claims history, but the other part of it too is that's just inherent in the utility industry for anybody who owns generation assets, and that really is heavily attributable to fires in the west, with generation assets and transmission assets causing fires and the insurance claims on it. And you have insurers dropping out of the market, which means you've got less competition, so higher rates. So those are kind of some of the dynamics that sit behind that.
Okay, so Jared, it's hitting the city also, insurance and liability also?
That is correct, and it will vary by unit, but there is, on most of the lines of coverage that we have, we need to pay 18 months, and that is simply to get the renewal dates into the spring, because right now those all trigger starting between October and the end of the year. And the way insurance is changing and going up, it puts us in a really bad spot of asking you to approve a budget with an insurance number in it, and then the market changes it. Making this change, we will come into budget knowing. So a portion of that increase disappears over the next year because it will go back to paying for 12 months at a time.
Okay, and are you seeing those kinds of increases in health insurance also, or are they not as great?
We are definitely seeing them in health insurance, so you've got that, but that's not in the property and liability.
Right, that's what I was asking. Do you see, is it kind of a mirror deal, or is health going up as much as this property and liability is?
No, it's
No.
not going up by the same percentage.
Percentage,
It's going up
okay.
significantly.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on our expenses?
Anybody?
Okay.
Onward.
Okay. Next section is the power cost recovery factor, also known as the PCRF. And of course, you know, this is the biggest cost on our customer's bill. This is about the 69% that Matt talked about earlier. This is the direct cost that it takes us to pay for energy to provide electricity for our customers. And this is the directly pass-through cost, so which means we try to equal our revenues to our expenses. This is a charge that we directly, whatever we pay, we pass on to the customer ultimately for them to pay their share of the PCRF. With that being said, you know, the PCRF includes our transmission capacity, demand, fuel, and energy costs, and all rolled up into the PCRF. As Harvey mentioned earlier, our pass-through costs have increased from about $196.1 million to $228.9 million, which is an increase of about $32.8 million, you know, and so the main driver of that is natural gas. You know, that's something we talk about every month, you know, and this is not only just seen in the ERCOT market or the SPP market. It's pretty much a global phenomenon right now, the increase of natural gas. It's not just something seen in the U.S. You know, we have our weekly talks with Tenasca, and the European markets are seeing the same increase in natural gas as well. So it pretty much is a global problem right now, and unfortunately, there's no relief in sight. We don't expect them to increase, but they're going to remain relatively flat for the next fiscal year. And on the slide to the left, you know, Matt already talked about this, so I don't want to overkill this, but you can see that, you know, in June 20 and 21, we were able to artificially lower the rates. You know, we were in a position where a positive position in our purchase power costs, and we were able to subsidize the rates for the customers with a return on lowering down our PCRF upper bound. So, but unfortunately, you know, natural gas prices are projected to remain elevated, which is an increase in our energy costs for next year. Energy costs are expected to remain about 15% higher than they were for this fiscal year. This portion or this slide just kind of breaks down the buckets of our purchase power costs. As you can see, energy and fuel is the biggest driver of our purchase power costs. It's increased from about $126 million to $180 million, which is a change of about $53 million. One thing I want to note also on this is, as you all know, ERCOT is the energy-only market, you know, and so the way we budget is we anticipate transitioning all our load in June of 2023. So that's the reason you see the decrease in transmission and capacity costs, because they shift to the energy and fuel component. You know, ERCOT, like I said, is the energy-only market, so they don't have a capacity markup. So if you can see here that the increase in energy and fuel is offset by transmission and capacity costs. And that's the main thing I wanted to point out. You know, capacity is, once we get out of we anticipate getting out of the 170 capacity contract on May 31st, we're only going to be paying 8 months of capacity for next year versus the 12 months we paid for last year. So there's kind of a breakdown. You know, I just wanted to point out the energy and fuel, it's not strictly just driven by increased costs. It also is that's taking 4 months of the summer months, which are, you know, the highest peak loads or the highest consumption months that we have, is going to be the most costly. So that's the reason for the increase in energy fuel as well. Any questions on the PCRF? Okay. And the last section of our O&M is our fund level expenses. As Harvey mentioned, you know, our debt service has increased $4.8 million or 14.4%, and that's strictly due to the $60 million issuance we're taking out for our distribution projects. Again, these projects were necessary to be able to make the upgrades to move the remaining transition 30% of our load in June 2023 as anticipated. And he also mentioned, I wanted to put a note out there, that a 20-year debt Issuance is expected to pay for the partial requirements contract, which total about $77.5 million for Southwest Public Services. The reason it's not in our budget is because even though we're making the issuance next year, the first annual debt service payment won't be charged to the next following year, which is fiscal year 23-24. So, but I just wanted to make you aware that there would be another issuance for that if the PUC and everything goes as planned for us to transition the remaining 30% of our load into ERCOT. Our franchise fee equivalent and pilot have increased $1.67 million and $3.4 million respectively, and that's just strictly due to increase in purchase power costs. We transfer 5% of franchise fee and 1% of our pilot to the city based on our purchase power costs. So that's the increase in the transfer to the city. Our transfer to capital did decrease this year, $8.74 million, or 34.3% due to the utilization of unallocated cash from closed projects over the prior years, as well as a reduction in capital costs. You know, this was a really tough year, and I really like to thank our project managers. You know, this was a year that we really had to pull the reins back and only do the projects that were really necessary and critical to moving the remaining load for next year. So they were really helpful in working with us and pushing out some projects that are not necessarily critical to our move. So we have deferred some of those projects into future years, but they are still in the capital program. Any questions on fund level expenses? Good? Okay. So I'm trying to get through this. Next section, next section is our capital program. Again, for next fiscal year, we funded 17 capital projects with monies for next year, totaling about $42.3 million. As you can see, 6 of those are just our annual projects, and those are all cash-funded projects. The other major one I wanted to highlight was our ERCOT Transmission Distribution Service Provider System project, also known as the MTM project, Market Transaction Management Project. And this is the project, of course, that, you know, Jamie presents every month or gives updates on that. This is the system that's able to talk to the retail provider. So it is critical that we finish this project and have this project going prior to us transitioning to the retail market. So those costs for next year are budgeted about $15.2 million, and our capacity upgrades are about $5.9 million. So our average annual capital program is roughly about $36 million per year in the future. And this chart shows our significant capital investment over the next 5 years. As you can see, you know, this chart kind of tells you the direction that the utility is going. You know, as we transition to a wires and poles company, you can see that the major costs are distribution and transmission. You know, that's going to be the main focus of the utility going forward, and we need to make sure that we upkeep our system and keep it up and running. That's the main point of our business. So this capital investment 5-year plan kind of shows you that we're heading in that direction, and that's where we're investing most of our capital going forward. With that being said, that wraps up the fiscal year 22-23 proposed operating budget presentation. With that, I think we need to make a motion to approve the budget and recommend it to City Council for final approval.
Got a motion? Got a second? Any further discussion? If not, raise your right hand and say aye in favor. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Passes.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
Okay. And of course, you know, the next is our fiscal year 22-23 tariff rate schedule overview. You know, it's all bound in one book, but it's approved in 2 separate resolutions. So I wanted to go over the major changes for next fiscal year. And again, there wasn't many changes, you know, in the tariff for next fiscal year. The main concern was that, you know, as we transition to the retail market, we needed to make sure that we got folks out of the budget plans and payment arrangements, you know, because we have to find a cutoff date to where we can stop that as we transition, so everything is paid prior to us going to the retail market. So most of these overviews kind of tie into that. So we did upgrade the payment arrangement language for clarity and conciseness, disclosing that no agreements will be extended beyond September 30th, 2023, as a move to retail competition is set to occur in late 2023. We also added language to clarify that back billing should not exceed a period of 6 months, but for instances of overbilling, the customer's bill shall be corrected for the entire period of the overbilling. We also added language that no new customers, as I mentioned, will be enrolled in budget billing beginning October 1, 2022. All the customers that are currently enrolled will be permitted to continue with budget billing, but we will cut that off prior to the transition to the retail competition. And this decision will be made by the Director of Electric Utilities to make sure that they have zero balances as we transition to the retail market. And lastly, we added language stating that LP&L may prorate monthly fees according to policies and procedures adopted by the Director of Electric Utilities. And like I said, there wasn't many changes in the tariff, for this fiscal year. It just mainly dealt with our transition to retail customer and how we handle folks on payment arrangements and budget billing. So with that being said, if there can be a motion to approve the electric rate tariff for fiscal year 22-23.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any other discussion, questions? Not? All in favor say aye and raise your right hand. Motion carries.
Good deal.
Thank you.
And just a final wrap up, again, I presented this to the Finance Committee on July 13th. Today, we're here presenting the budget for approval on the electric board from the EUB. And next up is the City Council workshop sessions, which run August 2nd through the 4th, and we'll present our budget to City Council for final approval as well. The City Council budget public hearing will be on September 6th. And the first reading of the ordinance is on September 6th as well. And then the second reading of the budget will occur on September 13th. And then if approved, the budget will be effective October 1st. So just kind of want to give you those timelines so y'all knew what the process after y'all have approved it. So.
Question?
Yes, ma'am.
Joe, how will, on the tariff deal, nobody can get in budget billing after October 1st. How will we letting people, so everybody's in it can continue, but then no new budget?
Yes, no new budget plans will be set up after October 1st for customers who are not currently on it.
Okay,
Yes,
how are we going to communicate that to them? Do you know? Do we have a plan? Or there's going to be a plan?
Yeah.
I think it'll be a combination of probably some sort of a public.
All right, thanks.
Game on. So again, I'm Michael Weingart. We have a lot going on. Engineering, our linemen, the contractors are working on the construction as necessary to move the remaining 30% load to ERCOT. Luke Miller and his engineering team are creating that step-by-step plan that we're going to have to carry out late next spring to actually move those remaining, and they're kind of sparse throughout the city, so it's going to be an intricate plan, and I know he'll speak to that. So our customer service group, Jamie, Michelle, Ashley, along with consultants, they're really working their tails off to make all these changes, these business process changes, and diving into the rules of ERCOT. They're really, I've been overwhelmed and super impressed by that group and what all they're doing. Matt Rose, he's working to develop our education campaign to do all we can to keep our ratepayers informed. That campaign is scheduled to start ramping up this fall and then carry through next year. So, and yeah, my comments don't really take into account everything that's going on. I mean, there's really not a group within LP&L that's not affected by this move to market, this transition. So today we're bringing for you our notice of intent to opt into retail competition. With the submission of this letter, we are officially notifying ERCOT of our intent to move in. Now, ERCOT's not going to be surprised with this. They know we're coming. We've already had quite a few meetings with them. August 2nd, Joel and Clint are going down to Austin to get in front of the Retail Market Subcommittee, the RMS, and that's going to be our official open to the channel to open that leg of communication, specifically with that group and the retail electric providers that want to do business in Lubbock. So the submission of this letter is a necessary step in the process. ERCOT requires a minimum of 12 months notice, and this official notice will be our 12-month. It's well in excess of 12 months. You know, our plan is fall of next year, so we're given some time to let that happen. As we move through the process over the next 15 months, we will be coming back to you guys periodically along the way as these major checklist items occur. In the coming 30 to 60 days, we're going to be developing criteria to select our default providers in the polar. That'll
be followed by an RFQ process to wrap up by the end of the year. That'll be something for sure that we're coming back in front of you. Once we open the registration process for retail electric providers, it's going to be your decision to decide if we do have enough people that these REPs that want to come in to actually create competition. So if there's not enough competition, that'll be something that we don't expect that to be the case, but just so you guys are aware. And then I also mentioned towards the end of the process, once we start really nailing down these days of everything that's going to happen, we're going to need a resolution just on the actual move that we will definitely have to come back before you guys on. So the business today is this letter. Do you need a motion?
Okay. So we need a motion?
So we do, yes, sir.
Okay, so got a motion? Got a second? Any other discussion, comment? All in favor signify by saying aye and raising your right hand. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Good work. Thanks. One more presentation.
Good afternoon. It's good to see you all. I'll try to make this short. I'm going to update you on our projects to move our remaining load or transfer our remaining load to ERCOT. So just a quick overview, just to recap what we're doing is all these projects that we're doing are moving the load, offloading 9 substations that are in SPP currently, and we're going to be putting that load or moving that load onto 12 substations that are already on the ERCOT grid. And to do that, we're upgrading 5 of our substations, and then we're building 11 distribution feeder projects. This looks like a lot. This is our schedule tracking the activities for our substation projects. I can tell you that this is our summary. We're tracking it in much more detail down to every PO that we cut. And so we're tracking these projects closely to make sure that we hit our timelines. The green line, the green vertical line is where we are today, and the red vertical line is that June 1st timeline that we're trying to hit. You can see different lines have different colors. Probably the ones you're interested in are the red lines. Those are the construction timeframes. And you can see that Co-op, Thompson, Vicksburg, and McDonald, the red timeline, the red construction bars all end before that red, before the vertical line, which is our deadline. So we are on track to get those things, to get these projects complete, pending any unforeseen circumstances. Again, Co-op, Thompson, Vicksburg, and McDonald are critical to being able to transfer or switch over the load. Yellow House and Northeast are reliability related that will come after our initial transfer. So they're not critical to the switch. This is the feeder projects. This is our schedule. The orange bars are the construction timeframes. So you can see that we've already completed Southeast and Chalker, and then we have 9 more projects that are, we have 1 project that is in construction currently, and then 8 more projects that will be in construction between now and June 1st at various times. And those are on track to meet the deadline. Ms. Stafford, last meeting, you asked me the question when we were discussing supply chain, how much of the material we had received to date. And we put together some information so we can see that. So that's what this slide shows. We can see.
There's a few uh-ohs.
Do what?
A few uh-ohs there on material delivered.
Oh, sure. So we have on the right-hand side, you have the percentage of materials delivered. Co-op and Thompson, those substation projects are currently in construction, and there's pieces of those line items of that material that are scheduled to arrive at certain pieces during that construction. And so you really won't see that at 100% until that construction's complete, or we've entered the completion activities for those projects.
So we don't have any concerns on delivery?
We do not have any concerns on delivery as of today.
Okay, so the 3 critical ones you said were Co-op, Thompson, and?
Co-op, Thompson, Vicksburg, and McDonald.
Okay, the top 4.
Mm-hmm.
that'll all be done by May of '23.
That's correct.
And so you don't lose any sleep over Vicksburg and McDonald's material delivered right now?
Currently, no. So the transformers, the substation transformers are the critical path, and they're scheduled to arrive at certain dates in the construction phase so that we can offload them where they need to be on the foundations that have already been poured, for example. If I'll back up to the schedule for the substation projects. The procurement line is in blue, and you can see that Vicksburg and McDonald, we've started procurement, but we still have quite a bit, and that's the lead times for that material to arrive. So you can see, for example, Vicksburg, we plan to have our procurement finalized in January, and McDonald, the procurement should be finalized in February 15th. Looks like the last item should arrive. That's a lot of information, I apologize.
That's right.
So that's where we're at today. There's several items on the agenda today. Those packages are still in planning. Once those are approved during this meeting today and those POs are cut tomorrow, those will move into the POs issued column, and then we won't mark that as complete or delivered until we receive those items. And that we'll continue to see, we'll keep this table updated, and so we should be able to see items move from column to column and then eventually end up at 100% on the right as we move through the process. So you can see Vicksburg on the feeder projects, there are certain projects that we've only had 2 POs issued, and so that material just hasn't arrived yet.
Okay, but after today, go back to that, all the packages in planning, those numbers will all go to the next column after today?
Certain packages, yes, the packages that are on the agenda today, once we approve those, then we'll cut those
move
POs,
Okay.
and then those will be in the package, the PO package column. And that's kind of how we're tracking these.
So do we need
But
a
we won't show
motion
that
to?
material as received while we're waiting on it to arrive.
Yeah, I
It's
think
on
that's a
consent?
yeah.
It's on consent?
This is just an informational presentation.
Okay.
So we're tracking it closely. There's a lot of work that goes into tracking these POs and making sure that we're going to receive the material when we plan to receive it. And right now, we're confident that we will be able to. So for these projects, I wanted to put the finances in front of you. The current appropriation, so what we've appropriated in 21-22 is a little over, just under 30 million, 29 million. Those are the critical projects concerning the cutover. We'll look at we'll have just over 17 million appropriated coming in October for a total appropriation of just over 47 million to complete these projects. That does include an 18% contingency for the unforeseen. So that's a pretty large contingency, and we don't expect to use all that, but it's there, for the unforeseen. With supply chain issues and different things that have been occurring, we want to make sure that we don't end up without funding to complete this project. This is an example of just one of the projects. This is a co-op substation capacity upgrade. And so what you see is the red line is the appropriation, and you can see that it'll increase in October. The orange is what we're forecasting to spend, and then the blue is our actuals. So you can see that we're forecasting to spend just under 4 million before October, and then after October, we'll go ahead and spend the remaining amounts to complete this project. And we have these graphs for each of the projects that are related to the cutover. So this is co-op. This one is the substation project for Thompson. It's a similar graph, although the numbers are smaller. This is the project for Vicksburg. You can see that the work that it's taking to do the capacity upgrade at Vicksburg is quite a bit more than what we're having to do at Thompson, for example. And that's just related to the actual work that's happening. So we're installing 2 transformers, whereas Thompson's only getting 1 transformer. So these projects vary from project to project pretty drastically. And then this is the forecast, the cumulative forecast for the McDonald's substation capacity upgrade. And so you can see when we expect the funds to hit the accounts for the projects. Any questions?
Anybody have any questions? Okay, nice to,
Thank you.
nice job. Anything else we need to do? Anybody else have anything that needs to be brought before? If not, we got a consent agenda, and I guess we need to take action on that. Okay, all in favor of the consent agenda, please signify by saying aye and raising your right hand. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Sorry, we need a motion and a second, and then we vote.
Okay,
I'll make the motion.
got a motion, retroactive, and a second over here. Don't repeat what I said there, but anyway. All right. Anything else? If not, then we are adjourned. Thank you all for your time.